What's up, and welcome to the Unwatchables. This here is a show where we talk movies, and if you're a returner, well, welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about What Men Want and Divergent. I'm Kylie, and I'm here with Marcus. Marcus, what were your initial thoughts?
Well, my initial thoughts of this film, the two, motifs, I would say, or the things that were really talked a lot about in the films were penises and men wanting to have sex with other men. Those are the two biggest takeaways I kind of had from the film. I mean, I guess this film also kind of deals with the concept of like an inner dialogue. You know, the dialogue that you have in your own mind. You know, it's kind of like your thoughts and what you tell yourself and the conversation you have. But yeah, those those three things are the biggest takeaways I have. What were your thoughts? I mean, obviously we're gonna get into the plot and everything else, but.
For me, my biggest takeaways were, basically, I think that there's a way to, imply crude things artfully, but obviously this movie kind of overdid it, so my biggest takeaways were kind of just the over-the-top scenes that were kind of gross or a little bit too sexual, you know what I mean?
Well, like, what were some of the ones that you thought?
For me, it was when Kellen Lutz's character was dressed up in the GIMP costume, for one. And then another was actually the scene right before that when she was getting ready in the bathroom. And it was this whole montage of her doing a whole bunch of stuff, just sort of preening herself. And then one of the little shots was her peeing, which just, I don't know, that just kind of grosses me out. I just didn't think it was really necessary because there was a whole bunch of other funny stuff that she did while she was getting ready. You didn't really have to include her peeing or wiping, which they did. So,
yeah, I mean, well, I guess before we get into all these specifics, yeah, you're right. That was a weird scene. I also kind of thought like, wow, that guy's gonna get back to his bathroom and think like, this is disgusting. But anyways, I mean, yeah, like I kind of feel like, so obviously going into this film, I thought to myself, okay, this is like a modern rendition of the film What Women Want, with Mel Gibson that came out, whatever, late 90s, early 2000s. And I haven't seen that film in a while, but I remember really liking it the last time I saw it and the first time I saw it. And, for that film, it was, it showed this, I guess you would call him like a, kind of like a machismo type guy. I mean, he works at this, like, I think he works at an ad agency or something like that. But, he's very, I don't know, he's like a guy that's 50 years old in 1999, and or at least how media would portray a man from that era. And in that film, he learns to kind of touch or get in touch with like a more feminine side, a more side that's understanding and caring. And this film, although I feel like, yeah, obviously it was a remake of What Women Want, it kind of adds in a little bit of the Jerry Maguire element. Kind of really reminded me of that because Jerry Maguire, the film's all about the relationship between Tom Cruise and Cuba Gooding Jr. as an agent and as a sports talent. But so this film kind of makes both things, and ultimately, you're supposed to leave this film with thinking the main girl, okay, she changed her life, she has a different outlook and she treats men differently. But I feel like it's kind of lost because I feel like she's just a jerk in general. Like, she's just not a very pleasant person overall. And you see her in this movie, she overwhelmingly interacts with men. So you could have the idea that it's like, oh, well, she's just a ball buster. She's just a very dominating person and she's just very mean towards men. Which is true, but, she's also just mean in general. So I feel like for her, the punishment or having to learn through this ability of reading men's minds, I feel like it doesn't necessarily apply the same way to her, like towards her. Because Mel Gibson in What Women Want, he was actually somewhat nice towards the men he worked with. And he didn't just seem like a huge over-the-top jerk. Where in this film, she just seemed mean right off the bat. Like, she's mean to her assistant. She's mean to people that she works with. She's just demeaning in general. And even to peers. I mean, I don't know. I guess those are some of my thoughts too. Just I guess of watching it.
Yeah. For me, I don't know. I feel like she kind of just was one of the guys in a way, which sort of, I mean, it's kind of a double standard because when women act like men or are ball busters or whatever, they're just seen as jerks, which is basically what you were just talking about, But, you know, I mean, at the end of the movie, you have to give it credit. She did have growth, you know, and so she did have an arc. And so I didn't think that the plot was terrible in that regard because, you know, she went through an emotional journey, I suppose.
Well, I mean, yeah, she's a better person at the end of the film than she was at the beginning. I mean, she treats her assistant better. She treats her dad better. She treats men that she's romantically involved with better. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. A lot of the film, I just kept thinking, like, this person isn't a very nice person. It kind of reminds me of, you know, when I watch Isn't It Romantic with Rebel Wilson. I kind of thought, like, neither women are necessarily very pleasant at all.
They're not likable.
Yeah, they're not very likable. When you have a whole film in which the person isn't very likable, it's very hard to, like, root for her. I mean, like, I mean, especially, okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I thought this film was kind of, it took elements from Jerry Maguire and it took elements, obviously, from A Woman Want. And I feel like in both of those films, there's so much growth with both of these guys. And understandably so, you know, Tom Cruise and Jerry Maguire is very arrogant and over the top. And then he's very humbled, has to live with the person that used to work underneath him. He's forced to live with her because he doesn't have a place to stay. And then at the day, you know, he ends up building a relationship with her, and then he builds a successful company with her as his wife, right? And yeah, same thing with Mel Gibson. You know, he basically really changed his whole position in life, and it's very organic. Like you mentioned, Allie, she does have an arc, and she does change, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, she's still a jerk, and before the end of the film, I mean, she stands up at this wedding that one of her friends is having, and during this wedding, she's just calling out people and this unnecessarily being a huge jerk. And I feel like they just wanted to shoehorn that in so that way it progresses you to like the third act where there's reconciliation. But yeah, it just felt so like forced and it felt so predictable and empty. And really the consequences from that happening aren't really that important to the film overall.
Yeah, I know. Her friends made up with her pretty much instantly when she bought them alcohol, so that didn't really end up mattering. And also, any sensible person would have just told their friend before their wedding, before they paid for this entire ceremony, you know? But I mean, I get that they had to have some sort of climax to the movie. Otherwise, you know, how would she lose this ability to read men's minds and whatnot? But you already have to suspend your disbelief for that, so having a ridiculous climax kind of makes sense. But also, I feel like her reading men's minds didn't really serve much of the plot. I don't know if you felt this way, but for me, I mean, in the beginning of the movie, she's terrible in bed. I mean, I get that she's dominant and whatever, but she's awful. I mean, that was just ridiculous. The way that she was.
It didn't look like real sex.
It was so weird. So her being able to read men's minds helped her to get better in bed. And it helped her to get the gays together, her assistant. And
it helped her to read, you know, Tracy Morgan's brain. And Tracy Morgan in that film, he's just LeVar Ball. I mean, that's literally, he's Lonzo Ball's dad.
Pretty much.
Film. And I mean, when she's reading his mind, I think that was just an opportunity for Tracy Morgan to think really weird things.
Yeah.
Oh, I forgot I had toast and blah, 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 and all this other stuff.
I have toast in my pocket.
And it's like, yeah, that's funny. But no, but you're right. Like, I mean, yeah, she doesn't actually gain all. I mean, she wins a game of poker. And she reads Tracy Morgan, but the thoughts that she's reading of men are like you mentioned, they're not really.
It's for self-gain.
Yeah, but it's also like not even high-level stuff.
No.
It's pretty like low-level, you know.
Well, except for, I mean, her friend's fiance cheating on her. I mean, I guess that was.
Yeah, but even if you just looked at him, I mean, he's like glaring at the waitress. Like it wasn't like it would have taken a rocket scientist to figure this out that, oh, this guy is like a scumbag.
I mean, I already talked about, you know, you have to suspend your disbelief for movies and whatever, and movies are supposed to be an over-dramatization of, you know, real life, but this movie was just ridiculous, honestly. And the stuff that happened, even in the beginning when she's getting that promotion, or, well, no, when she doesn't get the promotion, but she just leaps to the table and grabs the ball. I mean, no sensible businesswoman is going to do that, you know?
People in real business settings, they don't act like that.
No, I was just rolling my eyes this entire movie.
You know, one thing, another thing we haven't really talked about for this film yet either is like, it's weird that this film is kind of strangely an advertisement for the NBA. Like, there's a lot of random NBA stuff. So I get it that the player or the main the main goal that she has in the film is to get this actor who's playing a basketball player signed in the NBA, right? What was his name? Jamal Berry. Like, she's trying to get Jamal Berry into the NBA. Like, she's trying to audition to be his agent, which I'm sure that probably happens in real life. So you get that. It's like, okay, that's what they're going with. So let's talk about some NBA stuff. But like, so the poker table, you have Chris Webber, you have Shaq, and you have Mark Cuban. So Chris Webber, obviously a former player. Mark Cuban owns the Mavs, and obviously Shaq. So you think to yourself, okay, you see that in the trailer, and you're like, okay, that's whatever, you know? But then, like, they literally recreate a mock NBA draft. I mean, like, literally, the NBA draft takes place at the Barclays Center in Brooklyn. They show the Barclays Center. They show Adam Silver. They show Karl Anthony Towns. Like, they show the Hawks Arena. And the reason why the film takes place in Georgia has nothing to do with Georgia itself. It takes place in Georgia because it's cheaper to film in Georgia. Mm-hmm. So now they just say, we're in Georgia now, right? Just like the same with Baby Driver. But, yeah, you kind of watch and you're like, wow, there's a lot of NBA stuff. I mean, they literally had the commissioner for the NBA in this movie. Mm-hmm. Adam Silver. And it's like, what the heck was this? They had that former WNBA star. And definitely Tracy Morgan's character is purely based on LeVar Ball. I mean, like, I was even thinking, too, this Jamal Berry and Tracy Morgan, they're in Atlanta. That's their home area. And he says, I want to win a title here. It's like literally like a movie rendition of Lonzo Ball with LeVar. I mean, he grew up in, Chino Hills, right? So he's not very far from LA. Like, he grew up loving the Lakers. I mean, yeah, I just didn't really get that because I'm thinking to myself, okay, like, who is this movie for, right? Like, this movie, What Men Want, is a romantic comedy geared towards women, right? Mm-hmm. Like, so what the heck is up with all these references?
I don't know. I mean, my guess is that they got a lot of funding from the NBA for just advertising. A propaganda movie? I mean, not necessarily propaganda, but I mean, my guess is they didn't get a very big budget for this film. Mm-hmm. So they just kind of took the opportunity and the NBA stepped in, and I feel like they kind of made it their own in a way.
Well, you know what happens a lot of times in movies that deal with like the Navy or the Air Force or the Army.
Yeah, they get funding.
They get funding from the U.S. government, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the CIA is even admitted to giving money to movies and the State Department. So you kind of think like, oh, is this a propaganda piece? But whatever be the case, yeah, you just have to wonder if the NBA said, oh, how can we put this movie out? Like, mm-hmm. How can we get behind a movie? You know, one problem too is that, okay, so you've made a film that's for women primarily, right? Well, like, this movie literally features, I mean, I can't remember its runtime. The runtime's like an hour and 40 minutes, but let's say if the movie's an hour and 40 minutes long, like, the amount of time that other women are in this movie is like 5 to 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. This film is literally Allie with men, every scene. It's Allie and men, Allie and whatever grouping of men. It's never like, even her friends are only in what, like 4 scenes? 3 scenes? They're in the scene with the psychic. There's a scene at the wedding. There's a scene at the pool table. And then there's a scene at the reconciliation scene. Mm-hmm. And then for the psychic woman, she's only in 2 scenes, right?
Yeah, and then she's in the end credits.
Yeah, where she's like, but it's like a funny thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's not many scenes with other women in them.
No, and all of her friends were just kind of ridiculous, and they're all pretty much like your stereotypical like character actors, I guess. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you had the girl whose husband is cheating on her, and then you had the ridiculous religious whatever.
Yeah, which is weird because she was like she mentioned being Christian in a way that you think they would make fun of it, but like they don't go all the way far with it. Like, it's just kind of like
kind of subtle.
Yeah, but like she'll say it, but like you would think, okay, they're gonna do something way over the top, right? Where she's gonna have like you know, there's going to be a joke where she's going to have like a pentagram on her shoulder, something going away, right? Like, that's the joke of why you introduce her being a Christian, is to like mock it, right? Or you don't even mention it, right? They don't do anything with it. They just kind of, she mentions it a couple times and you're like, oh, well.
Well, I think the humor was supposed to be that now she's a Christian, then she would just like very casually mention something super crazy she did in her past before she was religious. So I think that was their attempt at humor with that. But it was kind of different.
Yeah, but like it just didn't really like manifest itself very well. And that woman, I mean, I can't remember her name, but she's pretty funny. You know, she was in Reno 911.
Was she in Bridesmaids?
Oh, I don't know.
I think she was in Well,
I know she's in Reno 911, and she was also in the Goldbergs. In Reno 911, she was pretty
She's really funny.
Yeah, I mean, she's like kind of a sassy person. I don't know who her two friends were, but
she was really underused in this movie.
She's in like 4 scenes or 5 scenes. And Pete Davidson, that was a total.
He was funny to me, honestly.
He was, but it was just so, like, honestly, and I feel like maybe I misheard it, but I when I watched this movie, What Men Want, like, I watched it in the theater by myself at like 10:40. The only other people in the film there was a mom with her, like, I would say 6-year-old son, 7-year-old son, right? So that was weird, like the sex scene, the mom's covering the kid's face, but so I don't know if I was distracted when this happened, but when Pete Davidson's thinking to himself when he sees Allie walk by, like he says something about how I paid 10 grand to see those nipples, right? I literally actually thought that, like, he thought that she was a transsexual. Like, I didn't even know that he was attracted to the assistant.
Oh, really?
And so another scene, I was like, wait a minute. So, like, I thought that was the joke, is that he thought that she was a transsexual and he was attracted to her.
Oh my god.
And then, like, it took me another scene. I was like, oh, wait, he's attracted to the assistant.
Yeah, it's a Brandon.
Yeah, like, I literally thought that, because I thought he said something, and then I was like, oh, what? Like,
that's funny. I honestly, for me, I felt like he was one of the funnier aspects of this movie, because I didn't laugh a ton, but I thought the movie was okay. I thought that the psychic was kind of funny. I laughed during the end credits a lot. She was just ridiculous. And I don't know what tea she gave her. Was that shroom tea or something? I don't know.
It didn't even have that big of an impact on her after she drank it.
No, but that was so weird, because this wasn't any type of a trippy movie or whatever. And then there was just that one scene that was just super intensely, like, kind of psychedelic. It was weird.
It's something I just thought of, that this film and Isn't It Romantic? They literally have the exact same way to tap into the abilities.
Hitting the head.
They both get hit in the head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and Isn't It Romantic? They were making a joke about that,
But
it's overdone, yeah.
Literally happens. They came out like, what, a week apart from each other? Something 2 weeks apart from each other? It's literally the same method is used to transport both people.
That's true.
To give them power. But there was
the psychic, though. There's a psychic involvement in What Men Want.
Yeah, but What Men Want, it's also the head hitting. The head hitting is the thing that activated it. That's what I talked about with the whole penis thing. That's another thing I forgot. She was wearing a necklace that had a little penis on it. And I think when she woke up at the hospital, the penis was, like, on her chin near her mouth.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think ultimately What Men Want, I guess it was an okay film for $20 million, whatever the budget was. I mean, it's better than a Tyler Perry film.
Yeah.
It was definitely looked a lot better than that Tiffany Haddish film that came out a while ago, where she just got out of prison and she's living with her sister. Whoopi Goldberg was in it. That movie looked like total crap. I guess that would be a great entry for this series. I don't know. I mean, I guess I would say it was a one-timer, I guess. I don't know. Somewhere between one-time or no time. I mean, like you said, are there parts of it that are, like, funny? I mean, there's some parts that are kind of like you can chuckle at. I think Tracy Morgan is always funny.
There's just a lot of parts that fell super flat, and I don't think that I don't know. I don't think that there's enough of a balance. I don't think that the funny moments outweigh the flat moments, and so I don't know. I'm really torn. I was looking forward to seeing it. I thought that it looked funny from the trailer, but it just didn't really deliver, and so I can't say. Maybe I'll say it's a half-timer.
Okay.
It's a half-timer.
I guess on a scale of 1 to 10, I mean, I guess I'd give it like a 3 or 4 maybe.
Yeah, I'd say maybe
I've seen
4 or 5.
In the last 6 months, I've seen just movies that are just god awful, and this movie is better than that.
Yeah, comparatively, it's fine.
Better than Gaudy, and it's better than Mortal Engines and Replicas. But it's certainly far worse than Venom and Fantastic Beasts 2.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I guess it falls in the middle there somewhere. All right, so for our next movie, I didn't want to cut it, Mason.
You're all good.
All right, so now let's get to the second film, which is Divergent, that came out in 2014. So, Kylie, what were your overall thoughts of this movie?
Well, okay, so in 2014, I had read the whole series and I was obsessed with it. So obviously, I really liked the movie. But I think I was only 15 years old or so I hadn't really developed a taste. I was just really into the big blockbuster action movies, and I really like Shailene Woodley. So initially, I really liked it. But as I read the book a second time, I saw the movie a second time, I realized that they made a lot of changes that weren't really in favor of the movie, and it kind of changed my mind. I mean, I still like the movie. I feel like it's not as effective as it could be and didn't really live up to its potential. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about the potential side of it because I always kind of viewed these movies and the Twilights and the Hunger Games. I always didn't really view them as good movies. So I don't really know if it really lived up or down to hype, but I remember when I watched this film, like, I was dating a girl at the time and she and we went to watch it at a movie theater. And, like, I was so bored, I walked out for 30 minutes of it, and then I came back. And I think I watched it a second time since then, but yeah, I kind of thought it was pretty terrible the first time I watched it. Like, I was a little older than you at that time, and yeah, I just thought, like, everything about it, like, just really didn't attract me. Like, I'm not a huge Shailene Woodley fan. Like, she went to school not far from me, and yeah, I don't know. I really like her as an actress. So, like, it's really hard for me to, like, actually like her on screen. Like, I don't, like, hate her, but yeah, and I just, like, when watching this film, I just kept thinking that this was, like, the market pantry version of the Hunger Games. This was, like, Shasta of Hunger Games. Like, the cheap knockoff. Like, I just kept thinking that, and, like, I like this cast more than Hunger Games. Like, looking back at it now, like, Miles Teller and Ansel Elgort, whatever, Baby Driver. Like, I like Miles Teller. I mean, I don't really like Jay Courtney, I guess, but I don't know. He was okay as the Boomerang Man in Suicide Squad, but he was awful in Terminator Genesis. So, yeah, I mean, this cast is better. Yeah, I just feel like the film, it looked kind of cheesy. And I know in the Honest Trailer they talk about this, but like it's one thing, I understand you're building up lore for your film, which is fine. Like, you have all these terms for things and your world is set up in a certain way, right? Which is fine. But, and they mentioned this in the Honest Trailer for this film, there's so many in-universe terms that are used. Yeah, there's so many in-universe terms used that it's just really confusing from a person's standpoint who hasn't totally digested the books. Like, for example, like, let's say, you look at Lord of the Rings, right? And I've never read any of the Lord of the Rings books or The Hobbit. And, when I watch Lord of the Rings, I feel like, of course, in the beginning of the first film, there's 15 minutes of exposition saying this is that and blah, 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 and this ring and that ring and blah, whatever. Like, I feel like when I was watching the film, I kind of got it. It's like, okay, they're elves and they're doing this. Or I guess there's one elf, whatever. Like, I understood the concept of what's happening. And Divergent, there's so many things where there's this class, that class. They're climbing on trains. They're jumping off trains. There's cutting or pricking your finger. There's, like, so many weird things that, like, I just didn't even understand what was, like, happening. Like, even, like, after the film was over, I was like, what just happened?
Well, yeah, so for Divergent, and I think Hunger Games too, you have to have read the books, I think, to appreciate the movies at all, because otherwise you're not really going to know what's going on. And with movies like these, they don't do a ton of exposition, which I tend to prefer, so you kind of find out things as you go along. But that being said, it's really hard to catch up if you aren't aware of, the books and all the terminology and whatnot. So I can see how that would be difficult and why you would not like the movie as much as I did.
I mean, somehow I inadvertently watched 4 of the 5 Twilight movies. I mean, like, I never set out to see any of them, but I watched the first one. I was working at a movie theater at the time, and I could see it for free, so I went with a friend. And, I mean, I very much understood what Twilight was about. Like, I didn't really like the first Twilight movie, but I understood what was happening. Like, I understood these are vampires, blah, blah, blah. They got powers, all this and that, right? And I kind of understood the plot. And I know that Twilight isn't as complicated as Divergent because Divergent takes place in a literal
dystopian future.
Yeah. So it's very far removed from our real world, where Twilight basically just interjects, I was going to call them lions. They interject werewolves and vampires and
That's
goblins
pretty much
or
it.
whatever else.
No, no, it's just
Goblins.
werewolves and
Yeah, I
vampires.
mean, they interject that stuff into our world, so it's very easy to understand. But yeah, I was just kind of lost, and the CG kind of looked like garbage. Jake Courtney, yeah, it's terrible at his worst. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I like Miles Teller as a person, but I didn't like him in that movie that much.
Actually, it's kind of funny that you mention him because in the book, his character Peter is really just a flat out antagonist. He doesn't have layers. He's pretty much just evil and he's doing whatever he's super violent. He just does whatever to, make his way up in the ranks. Whereas in the movie, he actually brings some humor. Okay. And I feel like he has more layers as a character and he kind of brings a little bit more to the table where you don't completely hate him.
Wait, is he a good guy in the movies?
No. He tries to kill Triss, yeah.
In all of them?
No, not... Well, it's hard to say.
He
he goes back and forth. He switches sides basically to cater to whatever his needs are.
Okay.
So he's not evil. He's just really self-serving, I guess. Whereas in the books, that's not the case. But I kind of like that they changed him a little bit.
So is he like the Chris Jericho of this franchise? Or he's just kind of on the fence. Sometimes he's a heel and sometimes he's the babyface.
Probably, yeah. I'm probably too young to get that reference.
Chris Jericho's still alive. He's not even that old.
But what movie are you talking about?
That's a wrestler.
Oh, he's a wrestler?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He has a tour right now where he has a cruise ship that he does wrestling things on.
How would I know anything about that, Marcus?
I don't know what references you know or not, but yeah, I mean, I guess you could talk about the plot a little bit. Like, what'd you think of Kate Winslet?
I thought that she was a really good antagonist. I felt like she had layers too because everything she was doing, she was claiming was kind of for the safety of the people. But honestly, underneath, she's really just someone who's really afraid of change and what that will do for her power, So I think, she does have levels, but at the end of the day, she's really just power hungry. And I thought she was pretty strong as an antagonist.
How do you think she compares to Donald Sutherland from Hunger Games? He's the main old bad.
Yeah.
Bad with the beard.
Honestly, it's hard to say. I think that I like Hunger Games more than Divergent, but I think that Janine, Kate Winslet's character, I think she's a lot smarter. I think that President Snow, he's a lot more tactical, like almost military, where she just seems a lot more intellectual. She doesn't really seem to realize that the people that she's killing or whatever are actually people. They're more like pawns kind of in her game. Well, I guess that's kind of similar to Hunger Games, but
they're literally playing games in the Hunger Games.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, if you know what I mean, I just think that she's a lot more intelligent, so she's a little bit more interesting to me.
The last film I think I watched Kate Winslet in before I watched Divergent. I know she was in several films between these two, but she was in a film that came out in like the late 2000s, maybe like 2008 or 9. And in that film, I think that she's a former Nazi, I think. It's something like that. And I know she's German around the time of the Nazis. And then she ends up having a sexual relationship with like a man way younger than her. I can't remember if he was a minor or not. I can't remember the name of the film. Like, I'm sure if someone looked it up, you could find it. But like, she's in this relationship with this minor boy, I think, or he's very young. So then this was the next film I watched after that. So I kind of felt like she kind of carried a lot of those same like characteristics.
Interesting.
Kind of like that praying, a little bit of like, those female teachers that have sex with their students that are like minors.
Yeah.
Like in this film, she kind of reminded me of that too. Kind of like, because those female teachers, right? Obviously they're bad people, but they also obviously they're also manipulators. And, they can play the victim and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So she kind of reminded me of that in both films.
Yeah, she, I guess I see what you're saying because she sort of manipulated Triss's brother Caleb. And Caleb, he entered Erudite and then he sort of immediately went up to sort of a high-ranking job position working for her. So I can kind of see how, she's really manipulative.
That's in the first film?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
she's just using him kind of to get to Triss, but she's super tactical about it and appeals to Caleb, I suppose. So I see what you mean. How did you feel about Shailene Woodley and Ansel Elgort being brother and sister in this movie, and then being lovers in The Fault in Our Stars just 3 months later?
Yeah, that was I did notice, like, in the Honest Trailer they bring that up too, that like there's another film that she's in with Miles Teller where I think they're somehow connected, right?
Oh my gosh,
where they date.
Yeah, it's a really complicated movie where he has daddy issues. She gets hit by a car. It's a whole mess of a movie. I can't remember what it's called.
So this film features her
and Miles Teller,
with 3 other men that she's made out with on screen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think they mentioned that in the Honest Trailer. Yeah, I mean, I think she's considerably worse actress than Ansel Elgort and Miles Teller.
Definitely.
Like, I feel like those 2 other guys, I mean, obviously, like, they're both really good. I mean, unfortunately for Miles Teller, I don't know if the Fantastic Four movie like really hurt his career or not, because I haven't really seen him in a lot of films since then. But yeah, I think he's a really good actor, and I also think Ansel. I mean, he is, I think, phenomenal in Baby Driver, and I think he'll be in a lot more movies coming on in the future. I guess the problem with Baby Driver is Kevin Spacey's in it. I wonder if they're going to do a non-Kevin Spacey cut.
That was his... Well, I mean, how can you, though? He kind of was... He was the boss,
to refilm the whole movie.
Yeah, I thought that movie was great, too. That was such a bummer.
I love
but
that movie.
If you go back and you rewatch it, knowing what you know now, there's some lines that are really weird. He says something to him like, "Are you going to be my baby?" Or something like that. And you think about all the things that you know now, and it's super weird.
Especially with people of that demographic, so younger men.
Yeah.
Like,
yep.
Because Ansel in that film, I mean, I think in real life, I think he's probably like 24, probably 25.
Maybe.
He's probably somewhere around that. So, but in the film, I feel like he plays a person that's like 20. So it's supposed to be,
I think they're supposed to be 16 or 18.
Really?
Yeah, because that's the age they are when they do the ceremony thing.
Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Baby Driver?
Oh, no, I was talking about Divergent. What am I talking about?
I was talking about Baby Driver with Kevin Spacey, like how he was like, just the way he interacted with Ansel was definitely weird, but yeah, I guess, so before we get too far off topic, with Divergent, I mean, I just feel like, I don't know, like, I thought the plot was confusing, I thought the CG was bad, I thought that she wasn't a particularly, like, great actress, but I guess, when Divergent came out, this was, at least for myself, I wasn't very knowledgeable about, like, like internet terms, let's say, for example, like the term Mary Sue, right? And, this whole idea of, like, I just feel like movies at that time, they had a little bit less politics than today. Do you feel like, is her character, like, a Mary Sue in the same way that, like, Rey is from Star Wars? You know the term Mary Sue means?
I don't think so. Can you explain that?
Like, a Mary Sue is, like, a female protagonist that, like, doesn't have to go through any adversity and just, like, has, like, all these powers without any training and stuff.
No, I think...
So would you say this film, they don't do that with her, at least?
I don't think that they do, because she's kind of... I don't really think that she fits this role. She's really plain, and she's kind of boring. In the book, she's supposed to be plain, and she's short and not good looking and whatever, but
really?
And her best friend Christine is supposed to be tall, but in the movie she's short, and so they kind of flip-flop roles of their strength and sort of who they were. And for Triss, I feel like the plot sort of moves her along. None of her decisions really affect much of it. It's more so outside influences, and so she does go through trials and tribulations and whatnot, but it's not really her own doing, so she's not necessarily a super strong character, I
mean, that there are some similarities between that and Rey from Star Wars, because a lot of people made that observation, especially in episode 7, that kind of things are just happening and she's just kind of going along for the ride, although she's super powered. But yeah, I mean, I guess I just feel like with Divergent, and I mean, I guess maybe it would have helped to have read the book, perhaps, but I don't know, I guess it's always like a debate, and I remember especially this debate was bigger, when they were actually adapting books into movies, more so than today, where it's basically just adapting properties loosely into films. Like, I remember the debate, like in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s, where, people are like, well, the book is so much better, like a movie would come out and they'd say, oh, the book is where it's at, right? And I always kind of thought that was like an archaic argument, because I always thought, well, like film as an art or whatever, it encompasses all these different artistic elements, right? It's a visual art, but it's also an auditory art. You're listening to something, you're seeing something, and you're kind of experiencing on multiple different like facets, right? Or whatever. And I just feel like, I don't know, like when you mentioned the book and the differences, I just feel like that's such a, I don't know, I don't think it's an excuse for why a film has to be so much worse than the book. Like, I feel like you can't, like, it shouldn't just be a thing where it's like, well, of course the movie's worse because the book was good. I feel like you should be able to adapt a good book into a good movie, I feel like.
I think that was done with Harry Potter, and I think that for, at least, I think the second Hunger Games, you can argue, is a pretty good movie, even if you don't like the rest of them. I like the first and second ones. But I mean, it's hard to argue that. I'm really biased because Hunger Games follows the books almost exactly, like they do it pretty well. And so that's why I favored it a lot more over Divergent. But I mean, it's different. They're completely different art forms, the way that the story is told. And when movies are made with the purpose of bringing a book to life, I think it's valid to say, they didn't follow the book. They made these changes and it didn't do it justice. Sometimes it does, but, in this case, I don't think that it did.
What do you think about the names of the characters in this film? Are they way over the top?
You mean, well, no, I mean, there's Peter, and then there's 4.
Well, I mean, how many people have you met named 4?
Well, I mean, the whole point of Dauntless is you get to choose your own name, and he chose that because he only had 4 fears and whatever. So, I mean, that the purpose of that was also because, he was beaten by his father when he was younger, and so he wanted to get away from, who he was as Marcus Eaton's son, Tobias. So he changed his name pretty drastically so that he wasn't really recognizable. And so I think that served that purpose, Otherwise, I think Triss is a really weak name for your supposedly strong female protagonist. Her name was Beatrice, which is also a super outdated name, and then she changed it to Triss, which I just don't like. It doesn't really roll off the tongue very well for me. I didn't like the names in this movie very much.
Well, it kind of sounds too similar to Trish.
Trish, yeah.
Like Trisha?
Yeah.
What the heck was the name of the girl from Hunger Games? What's her name?
Katniss.
I don't know what's up with these weird names.
I think because they're both set in dystopian futures, and so
So people have stupid names in dystopia futures?
Well, I mean, if you even think about now, back in 1900s or whatever, and you have women named Esther and Beatrice and whatever, and you think now, oh, those names are ugly, and now my name is Kylie, you have a lot of Haleys, a lot of Ashleys,
Well, a lot of girls in America today, almost all their names end in a vowel.
Yeah, so I mean, names change over time. I think the idea is that, like, they had to come up with sort of a unique system of names. So they had, Katniss and Primrose and, I don't know, President Snow. Just kind of weirder names, but I think it was just sort of to fit the time that they created.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a point. Oh my gosh, I was thinking of something when you said Dauntless. There's a movie where, like, there's a boat called the USS Dauntless, I feel like. There's a book or something has Dauntless in its name.
Really?
I can't remember what property it's from, though. Doesn't that sound familiar to you?
No, I honestly...
It's like a boat or a yacht or a cruiser. Some kind of boat with Dauntless in the name.
I don't know. I mean, it kind of sounds like a ship term, but I hadn't even heard the word until I read this book. Or erudite, or candor, or abnegation, or whatever. I wasn't even aware of these terms.
Well, yeah, that's fair, because those terms are totally ridiculous. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I just feel like overall with Divergent, yeah, I mean, it wasn't, like, the worst movie I've ever seen in my life. I mean, although the first time I watched it, I did walk around for 30 minutes during the movie just hanging out in the lobby, but yeah, I mean, it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it's certainly, I don't know, there's so many things in it where it just, like, I think there's too much in-universe talk. There's I know people hate exposition, or I know like CinemaSins, they'll mock exposition and say, oh, look at this long exposition where it just says all this stuff. And I understand that it's very boring, but sometimes it kind of just helps to have a little bit of that, some element of this is what's happening. There was World War III, blah, blah, blah. This happened, blah, this or that or whatever.
Well, I mean, it's good when it's tastefully placed.
Yeah, as long as it's done in a way that's understandable and kind of communicatable to people where something happened, this is the new world.
And it's not just like in your face,
Yeah, I mean, you don't want it, because, obviously, too, a lot of, you watch anything on Netflix that takes place in an alternate world or whatever, the future, there's all this exposition where it's blah, 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 all this and whatever happened. And I mean, you don't want to, like, hit people over the head with it with, like, a mallet, but, I mean, it could kind of help where you say, like, these are how the different classes of people were born up. Like, the potato sack, boring people, this is how they came about. This is how the Divergent rebels came about,
Yeah.
Because don't you get killed if you don't have a clique?
No, you become factionless, so they're basically like homeless. But one thing that they do reveal is that a lot of the factionless people are actually divergent because they can't really commit to one faction. They don't just belong to one. And so that was kind of interesting. So they're not exactly homeless. They're even sort of considered more evolved.
But they're homeless at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, according to their society, yeah. They live in... there is a factionless society, kind of, and then you later on find out that it's run by Triss's... No, wait, it's run by Four's mom. You find that out, because she escaped from his father, too, and it's a whole mess.
Jeez. Well, so Kylie, yeah, what were your thoughts overall?
Well, I'm a little bit biased because I did read the book, so... my overall thoughts were, I'd just say I'm a little bit disappointed by the movie and how much it strayed from the book and how the franchise just sort of tanked itself because of that, in my opinion. But, I mean, I would watch it again. I've watched it multiple times. I still enjoy it. So, I'd say I guess for people listening, I'd say it's a one-timer.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would give it a one-timer. I mean, certainly, you could totally skip it, and this isn't as good as, let's say, Venom or Avatar or other previously one-timer mentioned movies. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's, I guess that's a whole nuance of the Unwatchables overall is, even though it's called the Unwatchables, it doesn't literally mean these films are all crap. Just because that's the title doesn't mean that, oh yeah, this film is garbage and here's another garbage film. Because literally, I could say this as a person that's I've been on every Unwatchable so far, and yeah, it gets to be very emotionally and spiritually draining to watch all these crap movies. So like sometimes it's good to talk about films that are more like in the middle. And I guess I would say Divergent falls kind of in there. I would even say, What Men Want. That film isn't, on the crap to gold scale. If 10 is gold and 0 is crap. I would even say What Men Want is, although closer to crap, it's not like full blown, wow, this is terrible. I'm driving on the freeway and there's a manure on the ground or the soil right next to me that smells terrible in my car. Like, it's not that bad, but you could definitely skip it. And I feel like with Divergent, like what you mentioned, I mean, you don't even get the payout at the end of the day. And I feel like franchise like this or Twilight or Hunger Games or Harry Potter, you become very much invested and you don't only watch each film as one single entry. It's like this is a part of the larger plot, right? Like even like Star Wars or now with Marvel. Like you can't just take one entry and just look at it by itself. So I think that's one thing I think too would be disappointing about Divergent is like it doesn't have that end conclusion. So that could kind of suck if you're like, oh, what about this plot point or blah, blah, blah. And then if it doesn't get resolved, that could be kind of an issue. But yeah, I guess overall I'd say, yeah, probably one-timer. So yeah, I would say, yeah, so make sure you keep an eye out for our next episode. We have quite a few things in the works. We're going to do a Will Smith only episode. We got a Tim Burton only episode coming out. We're reviewing some Marvel films that maybe might get us some flack or some hate. But yeah, make sure you check out the Unwatchables and check out the other content we have on the site or on the YouTube page. Check out the talk spots and also make sure to check out the Dom Pod. This is Marcus, and I'm joined by Kylie.
All right, we'll catch you later. Later.